You learned the rule. To make a noun plural, just add s. Cat, cats. Book, books. Simple, right? Now tell me, how do you say two sheep? Not two sheeps. It's just two sheep, not a single letter different from the singular. And what about someone who knows English pretty well, but confidently says mouses instead of mice, or childs instead of children, or my personal favorite mistake I've heard in real conversation, I need some informations. A native speaker won't even understand what you just said, not because the grammar is wrong in some abstract textbook sense, but because it genuinely doesn't sound like a real sentence to their ear. Here's the thing. English doesn't have one plural rule. It has at least 8, plus a handful of leftover fossils that don't belong to any of them. And some of them follow zero logic. You just have to memorize them, because the language is over 1,000 years old and honestly doesn't care whether it makes sense to you. Today, we're breaking down all 8 types, starting with the basics and ending with the words that never change, no matter how many of them you're talking about. Stick around until the end. The last block is a list of words that look plural but are actually stuck in one form forever. Getting these wrong instantly gives away your level, even if everything else you say sounds advanced. And along the way, I'll throw in a couple of memory tricks that actually work, because just memorize it is useless advice on its own. Let's go. The simplest rule: add s to the singular noun. A cat, cats. A bed, beds. A pair, pairs. A teacher, teachers. Here's a detail almost nobody notices, even though they say it every single day. The letter S at the end doesn't always sound the same. After voiced sounds and vowels, it's pronounced like Z. Hands, trains, clubs, walls. After voiceless sounds, it's pronounced like S. Books, lamps, hats, streets. Quick trick to feel this without memorizing a chart: put your fingers on your throat and say dogs. You'll feel a vibration. That's the Z sound. Now say cats. No vibration. That's S. Your vocal cords are already doing the grammar for you. You just never noticed. In the next block, we get to the real reason you clicked this video, because just add s doesn't always work. Sometimes one letter isn't enough, and the word changes a lot more than that.
If a word ends in s, ss, x, sh, ch, tch, or o, a plain s sounds clumsy. Try saying boxes out loud, and you'll physically trip over your own tongue. So English inserts a whole extra syllable, es. A bus, buses. A box, boxes. A class, classes. A watch, watches. A hero, heroes. Look at that last one. Hero ends in o, and it gets es. So the logical conclusion would be any word ending in o gets es. And that's exactly where the first trap in this video is hiding. Because radio, radios. Piano, pianos. Photo, photos. Video, videos. Kilo, kilos. Also, zoo, zoos. Studio, studios. Logo, logos. All of them end in o, and none of them get es, just a plain s. Why? Because these are almost all borrowed words, mostly from Italian, Spanish, or, in the case of zoo, straight-up abbreviations, and the language treats them differently from native English words, like hero, potato, tomato, echo, volcano. Here's a rough shortcut that actually holds up most of the time. If the O word came into English recently through art, music, or technology, piano, photo, radio, video, logo, it usually just takes S. If it's an old, native English word ending in O, like hero, potato, tomato, echo, volcano, it usually takes ES. It's not a hard rule. English doesn't do hard rules, but it'll get you the right answer more often than a coin flip. Before we move on, hold on to this idea. Borrowed words play by their own rules. It's going to come back more than once in this video.
If a word ends in Y and the letter before that Y is a consonant, the Y turns into IES. A city, cities. A factory, factories. A cherry, cherries. A dictionary, dictionaries. A lady, ladies. Here's a fun edge case textbooks rarely mention. This rule applies to nouns, but not the same way to proper nouns. If you're talking about a family called the Kennedys, you don't write the Kennedys. Proper nouns just take a plain S, exception and all. So there are 3 Marys in my class, not 3 Marys. Names get to break the rule because changing someone's name mid-sentence just feels wrong to native ears, logic or no logic. If a vowel comes before the Y, a boy, a key, a day, a monkey, then it's back to block 1 rules. Just add S. Boys, keys, days, monkeys. No transformation at all. The pattern to remember: consonant plus Y transforms, vowel plus Y doesn't. You now know 3 rules, but this is where the video actually starts getting interesting, because so far we've only talked about adding letters. Now we get into words that completely restructure themselves. If a word ends in F or FE, the plural often swaps that letter for VES. A shelf, shelves. A wolf, wolves. A leaf, leaves. A knife, knives. A wife, wives. A half, halves. A loaf, loaves, as in a loaf of bread. A thief, thieves. Sounds like a solid real rule of the language, but English loves exceptions to its own exceptions. Here are 4 common words that end exactly the same way in F and completely ignore this rule. A chief, chiefs. A safe, safes. A roof, roofs. A reef, reefs. Just add S, done. No VES anywhere. If you ever say roofles instead of roofs, people will understand you, but they'll pause and give you a confused look. This is the exact spot where a perfectly learned rule gets tripped up on every grammar test. And to make things messier, a small group of words actually accept both forms, and native speakers argue about which one is more correct. Hoof can be hoofs or hooves, scarf can be scarfs or scarves, dwarf can be dwarfs or dwarves. Fun fact, dwarves as a spelling barely existed before J.R.R. Tolkien deliberately used it in The Lord of the Rings to make his fictional dwarf race sound more ancient and mythic. He basically nudged an entire language toward a spelling that felt right to him, and it stuck. That's how much room for personal taste exists inside grammar rules. Now, we're moving into the part that really messes with beginners' heads, because up to now, every change happened at the end of the word. From here on, the word starts changing right in the middle.
There's a group of words that don't add any ending at all. Instead, the vowel right in the middle of the word changes. A man, men. A woman, women. A foot, feet. A tooth, teeth. A goose, geese. A louse, lice. Yes, lice as in head lice. Same pattern as mouse, mice. Quirky detail: woman is spelled with an ah in the middle, but pronounced closer to woman, while women is spelled with an e, but actually pronounced closer to women.
The spelling changed the vowel letter, the pronunciation of the first syllable changed almost the opposite way. It's one of the most mispronounced plural forms by learners, precisely because the spelling logic and the sound logic point in different directions. These are leftovers from Old English grammar. Over 1,000 years ago, English had far more patterns like this, using something linguists call umlaut, a vowel shift triggered by a sound that used to exist at the end of the word and later disappeared but left its fingerprint behind. Almost all of these old patterns eventually smoothed out into a regular S over the centuries. These 6 words are the surviving dinosaurs of that old system. And interestingly, German, which is a close cousin of English, still does this constantly. Mann becomes minner. Fuß becomes Fuße. English mostly abandoned the pattern. German kept building on it. Same family tree, very different outcomes. That's exactly why native speakers don't find men or feet strange at all. They've just been memorized since childhood, the same way irregular plurals get absorbed automatically in any native language, without anyone ever explaining the historical reason behind them. One more small group of words, just 2 common survivors, but both extremely frequent in everyday speech. A child, children, and ox, oxen. Here, a whole new ending appears, en, which doesn't show up anywhere else in this video. This is another leftover from Old English, when there used to be far more words like this. Brother once had the plural brethren, still used today but only in a formal, almost biblical sense. Brethren, for actual siblings, sounds like something out of a medieval sermon. Same root, 2 different plurals for 2 different registers of English. That alone tells you how much history is buried in a single word. Child, children, is one of the most common mistakes even among fairly advanced speakers. It's very tempting to say childs because your brain is already wired to reach for S almost everywhere. Interesting technicality, children is actually a double plural. Historically, it was built from an older plural, childre, and then a second en was tacked on to that. So the word wasn't just made plural once, it was made plural twice by 2 different generations of English speakers, who both felt the older form didn't sound plural enough anymore. Now, the most interesting block in this video, because so far the plural word has at least resembled the original. What comes next is a case where the plural is literally a different word.
A mouse, mice. A person, people. Mouse to mice is actually the same category as man to men, a vowel change inside the root. It just looks so different at first glance that many people file it separately. Worth knowing, though, in computing, mouses is sometimes used instead of mice when talking about computer mice, purely to avoid the confusion with the animal. I bought 2 new mouses for the office sounds odd grammatically, but it's genuinely common in casual tech speech. Language bends when the correct word gets confusing in context, even for native speakers. Person to people is a whole different story. Historically, people came from a completely different word than person and simply took over as its plural. There's also a second, less common plural, persons, which shows up specifically in formal or legal English. All persons must exit the building on a fire safety sign, or person or persons unknown in police reports. So technically, English has 2 plurals for 1 word, and which one you use depends entirely on how official the sentence sounds. We've now seen a word change slightly, change a lot, and get replaced entirely. But what if I told you there are words that don't change at all, not a single letter? This is where the sneakiest part of the video begins, because even people with a genuinely strong level make this mistake. These words look exactly the same whether you mean one or many. One sheep, two sheep. A deer, two deer. A fish, two fish. A salmon, several salmon. A bison, 5 bison. A moose, 3 moose. A swine, several swine. A dozen, 2 dozen. An aircraft, 2 aircraft. A species, several species. Yes, this one trips up even scientists writing papers. A series, 2 series. Notice the pattern. Most of them are either animals people historically hunted or farmed for food, or units used for counting and machinery, or scientific or formal words borrowed from Latin that just never picked up an English-style plural from the first place. Species and series both come straight from Latin, where they already looked identical in singular and plural, and English simply never touched them. The historical explanation for the animal group: when talking about creatures people caught or raised in bulk, speakers often didn't bother distinguishing singular from plural in everyday speech. It didn't matter grammatically whether there was 1 fish in the net or 100. The sentence structure around it already told you the number. I caught 3 fish. The word 3 is doing the counting, not the noun. That's exactly why a native speaker says, I caught 3 fish, not 3 fishes. Although fishes does technically exist, but it refers to multiple species of fish, not multiple individual fish. The aquarium has fish, some number of fish, versus the aquarium has fishes from 5 continents, multiple species. One tiny letter, completely different meaning, and almost no native speaker could actually explain that rule to you if you asked them on the spot. They just feel which one sounds right. Now, the final, most practical block of the video, because next, we're not talking about how a word changes anymore. We're talking about words that simply don't have a second form. These nouns physically can't appear in the singular because they describe objects made of 2 matching symmetrical parts. Binoculars, pliers, tweezers. Same logic, always plural. Pants, American English. Pajamas. Goods, clothes. Spectacles/glasses. Scissors, shorts, trousers. The logic behind trousers and scissors is obvious. 2 pant legs, 2 blades. If you need to talk about just one, English forces you to add a counting phrase, a pair of scissors, a pair of trousers, never just a scissor or a trouser. Try it the other way and it instantly sounds foreign, even in a whisper. But then there's news, and this one belongs in its own category. Logically, one piece of news should be new, but no, even a single piece of news is still news, and the verb stays singular. The news is good, not are. This confuses even intermediate learners for years because the S at the end screams plural visually, while the grammar underneath insists it's singular. It's the exact opposite trap for scissors and trousers. Those look singular-ish in meaning, but are grammatically plural. News looks plural in spelling, but is grammatically singular. 2 mirror image traps hiding in the same block. And the true mirror image situation, words that have no plural form at all, even in languages where the equivalent word is naturally plural. Traffic, homework, athletics, mathematics, luggage, knowledge, information, advice, furniture, money. Saying monies, informations, or homeworks is one of the most reliable ways to instantly reveal a non-native speaker, even a fluent one, because these nouns are what linguists call uncountable. Grammatically, they're treated as one continuous mass, like water or sand, rather than as separate countable items, even though in real life, money obviously comes in individual bills, and advice comes in individual pieces of wisdom.
When you actually need to count them, English forces you to borrow a counting word instead: a piece of furniture, a piece of advice, an item of luggage, a bit of information. Notice something? You're not pluralizing the noun, you're pluralizing the container word around it. 3 pieces of advice, never 3 advices. The advice itself stays frozen in its uncountable form forever, no matter how much of it your grandmother gives you. So English doesn't have one plural rule. It has at least 8, plus historical leftovers that don't fit anywhere. The basic S, SEs after hissing sounds, Y to IEs, F/FE to VES, with its own exceptions and even some words that accept both endings. A vowel change buried inside the root, the N ending, a fully replaced word, and matching singular plural forms for a mix of animals, machinery, and Latin borrowings. On top of that, there's a whole group of words that only exist in the plural, and another group that only exists in the singular, no matter how much of it you have. You won't lock all of this in after one video. It sinks in through repetition, through listening and reading real English until your brain just starts feeling which form sounds right, the same way it already feels the difference between the S and C sound at the end of a word, without you ever studying it consciously. Save this video. You'll need it the next time you run into sheep in a sentence, and pause for a second, wondering if that's 1 sheep or 100.